Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with the second episode of Tojo's War, Japanese focused series. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Many great Hearts of Iron videos here. If you're not into Japan, I'm sure that you can follow Hearts of Iron 3, Germany, or many others. Countries. So, and of course we're playing Black Ice. Very much build-up phase. Okay, expanded Mitsubishi. About advanced torpedoes. Warrior traditional national unity. We don't get so much doctor research. Would reinforce the supporter on just yet trying to incident. So need to round up port now. We have, let's see what we have. Albert. Oh, table fight. So. Fighters. Early one. The A5M1 did not have retracting landing gear. More of those, so we will do. We also need more heavy machine gun team. Useful. Infantry equipment. No, not that. Well, let's just add one here. Take this down by one. Places of that. And let's about build. Or whether machine guns or aircraft. Let's that. National Spain. Demigod. Two economic. Third. Let's. Done all right with some of these. Captain. Infrastructure. Probably first. Okay. This page is ahead. Definitely. Search. Efficiency. Searches. Access to it. Okay, Five Ministers Conference. The Five Ministers Conference was a meeting between 5 important Japanese ministers in which they laid out the plan for Japanese expansion. It was decided to expand southwards in China and other parts of Asia. The Soviet Union was not ignored, however, and part of this plan was also to build a large enough army to enable to defeat the Union. Foreign Minister Arita generally approved the plan, but stressed the importance of maintaining goodwill with the United Kingdom States. Prime Minister Hirota agreed with the plan and decided to let the army or navy draw up a plan. Now, put this in some context. That's a picture from Surrender. I do believe. Put this in some context. Japan got, thanks to great bulk in the number of islands out here, from its participation in World War I as an ally against the Germans. A lot of these islands had been. And if you look at a lot of stuff, and I've been collecting propaganda made during the early 30s, 35 and before, and late 20s, was a lot of stuff with naval flags and ship pictures that featured both Britain and Japan together. These were developed and made Japanese. Japan had, going all the way back to the late 19th century, had also been sort of an ally with Britain in carving up not ownership like it is doing now, but regional economic penetration into China, ally with a lot of the European powers, particularly Britain as well, but also Germany. And so that they had been that. Their main European competitor, as they saw it, was Russia. And I use that term instead of the Soviet Union, because you have the Japanese-Russian War. They get Port Arthur, away from the Russians during that time. This is Vladivostok, but the Russian Imperial Russians down here. And so there's this major war. I have a really nice book of collection of photos and sort of presages, if you will, World War I, and a lot of trench warfare, that type of stuff, static static wars with heavy, very immobile artillery firing at each other at various sieges. And so Japan, even as they are plunging into the Second World War, is not completely delusional. They know they can't march an army into Moscow. No matter what you can do in Hearts of Iron, even now, Black Ice or whatever, whether I or somebody else you can see online, shows, Japan written all across here because they've taken it. That is not possible in reality. Japan cannot do it. Just flat out possibility. Now, if they're at war with the Germans and whatever else, the Germans are going to, move. Now, how far, how much, can you get past Lake Lagoda? That's the right lake here. If you can get west of this lake in any substantial means or whatever, I don't know. So Japan is looking at defeating now here, if you will, the Soviet Union and this part of the world, knowing that there's basically only one real railway going here. That maybe at this time does come around the lake, I think. But for some time it hadn't, and it just come to some point in the lake and everything had to put on ships, basically, because it's a pretty big lake. Transported across the lake and then put back on railways and cross, including railway cars onto sort of ferry type thing. So they knew it was a very limited access in a strategic sense. So that defeating them out here means you can have a bottleneck somewhere here that you can hold in a practical way against sort of the full might. Because when you're talking Russia, especially, I don't know how really it is today, but I still suspect highly. Once you're talking east of the Ural Mountains, you're fairly sparsely populated, limited industrialization, limited infrastructure. This is the sort of the heart of Russia here. So getting armies from the heart of Russia in a major way out here and supplied is very, very difficult. Note I did say a major way. And whether Russia is at peace, and I'm saying Russia because it could be whether Soviet or Imperial Russia or modern Russia, still has whatever it's doing, still has the potential of having a war with people out here. So it can't just send all of its army, whatever size of its army, this way, no matter what it thinks. It has to defend the western part of the country, whether from breakaway states or from invasion. Now, right in here is the Straits of Tsushima. The Imperial Russian Navy did a really brilliant thing in that it sailed out, I believe, from up here in St. Petersburg area, sailed all the way around Africa, all the way up to... It may have been able to stop and get coal at a couple of spots. It was in 19. Sailed all the way up to here, which is a remarkable feat for the Russian Navy. Coming up here, and the Japanese Navy did a remarkable thing for a non-European power, promptly sunk this fleet in the Battle of the Straits of Tsushima. And this really sort of cemented the Japanese Navy as a world power. Not a world conquering power, but one of the major powers in the world. And the Imperial Japanese Navy had long been trained by the British Royal Navy. So they had deep cultural ties between them. And also you have to remember this comes out of the idea, you had the Crimean War, around the 1860s, which was Britain versus Imperial Russia, so that you have a sort of Russian-British conflict and imperial power balancing, particularly over India, but also over some parts of the world. And so again, you have this sort of Anglo-Japanese alliance system. The Americans weren't really part of it. The Americans, part of their problem with both Britain and Japan is partially philosophical, partially practical, and they sort of tie together. Americans believe, used to, not anymore, of course, but used to believe in free market capitalism. And I say that very carefully there, because there's different forms of capitalism, and there's other economic systems that has private ownership of the means of production, that the left, and I say that meaning various forms of the left, often call as capitalism and point to as bad things and blame for being bad. One element that predates capitalism, because capitalism as an economic philosophy that bases on observed economic factors, starts with Adam Smith. And he's around in the 18th century, and this predates it. It's called mercantilism. This is where you get things like the triangle trade. Britain gets so there's actually sort of two triangle trades going on at the time. It's trade goods, sales down to colonies that are really just along the coast at this time. For slaves, gets the slaves, takes them to here, and then gets the products from here, tobacco, sugar, and takes them back to Europe. Now, what they were trying to do, and there's also sort of another triangle trade in which made products go straight from Britain to here for manufactured goods, I should say, to here, and then from here, rum and molasses are taken to the colonies initially here, that are then traded for resources, which then go to Britain to manufacture them. Britain. But this whole trade around is designed to be, and there's laws that restrict it, to purely within the British colonial system. And there's laws in Spain that the Spanish colonies here cannot trade with, say, Jamaica, or with first the British colonies, then later the United States. They cannot trade. If you're going, if you have, say, if people living in Cuba here, a Spanish colony, wants an English good, the way it gets there is that you sell it out of Britain to Spain, and then from Spain it gets shipped to Cuba. That they cannot trade with each other. So, trying to keep this politically correct with going locally. I don't know. Okay. Let's say some of the timber resources that are straight, tall trees that are coming out of this part of the United States. A shipbuilder down here in Cuba needs them. That wood has to be shipped to Britain, sold in Britain, in a British market, then needs to be sold to a Spanish market, and then sold to Cuba. You can't trade directly. This is all part of mercantilism. And Britain and other mercantile market wants to trade in between each other, but they want to control the trade, and they all want to go through central processing nodes. You can often see some of this stuff. I haven't been playing the recent E stuff, but you can sort of kind of see this in this. This is mercantilism, and I know many of you are EU players, so you know a bunch of this, but not everyone. So this is a limited, enclosed merchandising system, all sort of balanced out. Britain loved to trade goods into Europe. The whole continental system that Napoleon was trying to enforce was trying to freeze Britain out of the European trade. They wanted that to happen. But whether it was France, Spain, Portugal, or whether the little Dutch colony, little Danish colonies, or whatever, they did not want trade going around directly between each other. Now, of course, it did happen. It was called smuggling, and it was against the law. And you know, the Royal Navy, as well as other navies, more the Royal Navy, because a lot of the other local sort of groups were partially corrupt, but also partially starved for the goods, and knowing that their local trade goods were very valuable and that they could sort of trade them off. So, you know, but you got to realize that this whole, everything outside of Brazil and these little countries is basically part of the Spanish trade empire, and that's how they kept themselves going. So this is mercantilism. And this is what a de facto system that most of the European powers, including Japan, obviously European power, wanted with China in the 19th century, is that they wanted to carve up, and they did, zones of economic access to, so that there was a large French zone, and then a large British and a smaller German. Germans were often around here, and then the Japanese zone. America, because it was a fundamentally free trade capitalist type of situation, is they go, this is nuts. This is just nuts. Now, part of it is that they're sort of late to the game, and that they didn't have an army or navy that was really willing to force control over sections. But they wanted free trade within China. They go, yeah, the old imperial Chinese system of freezing the rest of the world out is bad and wrong. Philosophically, they believe this thing, that it's bad and wrong. It's like believing that communism is bad and wrong, whether you believe it or not, or whatever, and whether you believe that a country should be allowed to freeze out trade just for its own reasons. Another thing, but partially on philosophical, partially on practical grounds. But the U.S. wanted the open door policy, meaning everybody gets to trade anywhere they want to. Now, the Chinese also is part of this whole thing is they can choose not to keep out traders, but choose not to buy from a trader. That's sort of the distinction that the U.S. sort of had in this period of collapsing Chinese imperial power. In that, instead of like legally, the old trade down in Canton is why these trading islands are down here, is that all trade must go through the trade gates down here into the rest of it and controlled by China. The U.S. says, no, that's not right. We have the right, they believed, to ship in goods. Now, that doesn't, and to offer them for sale, but that doesn't require the Chinese to buy them. Okay? And of course, the goods were going to be cheap enough that some Chinese were going to go, oh, you mean cloth is only that much? Or you can get, this is sort of, especially when you're talking Shanghai in a post-opiate sort of opium wars, post-opium wars kind of thing. You're talking cheap manufactured goods. Oh, sure, you mean it's that cheap? Yeah, we'll buy it. So somebody would buy it. America just wanted to give everyone the option, including the option to say no. So if a local Chinese manufacturer could manufacture it cheaper, better, or whatever, they could do it. The Europeans wanted to limit it to, you can only buy their stuff, and even freezing out local production. So, and that if in the French zone it's only half as much as it is in the British zone for lanterns or sewing machines, or I don't know, whatever it might be, well, you can only choose to buy it from the British, no matter what the French and the French zones were charging for it. They were trying to set up this mercantile trade system. And again, this is what a lot of critics point to problems with capitalism, in which there are other systems that allows private ownership of capital, but aren't capitalism as expressed by Adam Smith and general followers down through refinements of his theories. So that's why America is counter to the Japan, British trade zones options, But they realize also that the United States is the other major navy in part of the world. So Japan had a choice here of what to do. Now, we'll get into some more details of this later on with America. But they're looking at the big danger as being from a physical sense. But they're also looking around the world and seeing it, if you will, in a mercantile sense. Japan, largely, not entirely, post-World War II embraces the international trade capitalist viewpoint. They still, of course, have massive, and still to this day, that's why the Japanese economy is sucking. We realize the Japanese economy sucks right now. Is they have a lot of protectionism at home, massive amounts of it. And so it is. I don't know which is more protectionistic, China or Japan in the modern day world, but they have a lot of both structural as well as legal protectionism. And so it's structural by means of the idea that it's incredibly difficult to build something like what Americans would think of as a supermarket in Japan. I'm not saying there's none there, and I don't know the current state of a lot of it, but a lot of shopping is done in very small shops, often somewhat specialized. And it's sort of this infrastructural, the idea of big mass purchase protects the sort of merchant class retail sales in Japan. I don't know how it's faring the online world, but that's at least my pre-online knowledge of Japan's, the 80s, the 90s, Japan's setup is that it's delivering the goods, even if you can legally, say, import it into a warehouse into Japan and then legally sell it, getting it to the actual market of the Japanese people. There's lots of physical structural problems in getting stuff sold from the outside. So that is part of the reason for the modern trade deficit, at least from America's standpoint, with Japan. So there's structural as well, legal problems. So, okay. So we can let the Army draw up most of the plans, unlocks northern expansion, doctrine focus, let the Navy southern. We're going to, because we're doing Tojo's war, even though he's Army, we're going to go with the southern. But I don't know about, I presume a lot of you, since you're here and you're listening through all of this, is that you're fascinated too by how this all draws up to. It isn't just, okay, Olympic events, another series, field workshops. It isn't just sort of an accident or, oh, these are fascist powers, so they had to go to war with the democratic powers kind of thing. And that's why World War II happened the way it happened. There's a lot of factors. They go back to, well, Germany obviously in Europe is very much focused on World War I and the effects from it. Japan and Asia and the whole Asian situation is really coming out of the 19th century, much more so. I mean, Japan was and both China and Japan were at war with Germany. I don't know if the Japanese really did much more than move in and occupy islands that were German colonial islands. China did send troops into France. To the best of my knowledge, none of them ever fought. They were used as labor, military labor, shifting artillery shells from train cars to wagons so that they would, the wagons would then take them up to the front, or some things like that. Unloading ships coming from America or whatever. I don't think they were treated, again, notice the word I think. I don't think they were treated badly, but I don't know that they were treated overly well, considering the conditions realities of World War I troops. They weren't used as slaves or anything like that. But I think a lot of the Chinese troops thought, oh well, we were coming to go fight in this war, probably without knowing really what World War I trench warfare was like. But the Europeans didn't trust them to do any real fighting, so they ended up just being laborer troops, if you will. Not, and I'm trying to say that in a way, is that they weren't like combat engineers or anything anywhere near the front lines, but they were doing necessary work that some able-bodied males needed to do. I'm trying to say it that way. Meaning it could have been like, I don't know, 50-year-olds that were too old to fight at the front line doing those kind of troops. They didn't need to be, combat-ready personnel to do the work, but they needed to be relatively fit, often doing labor a little heavier than most women in 1917 would be doing. That kind of stuff. But China's contribution to World War II. Okay, so we have that. Okay, so we're supposed to do base strike. Convoy escort, submarine operation. Let's do carrier primacy. Japan went down that path. I think that is the path to go down. So you get all these all these players with various factions. I could easily see Japan coming into an anti-Soviet alliance. I could easily see Japan pursuing a closer pro-British alliance. But by the time you're getting into 38, 39, they had already done enough. Alienate. Okay. Okay, that's sort of what I think I'm pushing. Get the additional. Okay. So, now that we have the ability, or we need types that we're currently producing need meat. Producing light tanks, and since we're going to be fighting against the Chinese, not that medium tanks won't be useful, they're just probably needed. How are we doing with trucks? For my last series, how badly I needed trucks for Britain and didn't have enough. Okay, so we transport vehicles. Those are for like the artillery ones, and we're good there. I think I want to do more infantry. Just, yeah, basic right. And mentioning that, let's add another basic production. Okay. That we have, these are now way, so shipyard. Okay, well, we can produce more. Now we're going to be or things that and aluminum. That. Now, of army fighters. Production of those. Get these done. Now, okay, here. Okay, civilian factory converter. We don't need those. We don't need small arms and factory production speeds, particularly. But okay, and we have Yuda. Hiro Yuda. Okay, already, but we want to get rid of this guy for probably the for industrialists, which will help us factory stuff. I recognize some of these for my outdated date minister mod. Some of them I don't. These guys all related here? Hey, I'm gonna have to look these guys up. Beat that guy. Swapping you out. Nobody knows anything about him. I'd love a link to I definitely didn't find them, but I never found a really good list. Randomly picking up a few personalities for production. Very good. Oh. Motorcycle. Okay. Yep, sure, we'll take some more. Okay, now we have the yeah, I think just to be cool to get theater class production. That this. Oh, rivalry. Good name. Here is what we forwards early on. Just better to get those things early than wait. Down here, look to our your op. Okay, well, not like the British variant. Good. Okay, just wanted. So, best destroyer. Now we're pretty still. We're just pulling everything. Well, we're going to end the episode here. I hope you've enjoyed the start of this new series. Hope this will be a great series. And I've already made a protection move of the version of Black Ice that we're using, so that if they update it, we should be secure enough to keep it up. Thanks so much. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.